Hey, welcome to Just Design YouTube channel. The last video I made on this channel was about my interest in footwear design or fashion design, however you want to call it. But it was about these Yeezy 450s, I don't know, that I had. But forget that. Let's push that aside. And today's video is a totally different subject matter. It's not fashion. It's not design. Even though this page is called Just Design, or this channel is Just Design, I still plan on making videos about fashion or anything design that I'm interested in, or anything artistic that I'm interested in. But today's video, as I mentioned, is a faith-based video. As you have already seen in the title, it's called God's Plan. What is God's plan? This video was inspired when I heard Pastor Jason Rowland say this on stage a week ago.
This is a situation that doesn't necessarily fit in our theology. God told them not to marry foreigners, yet God was the one that led Samson to do it. God knew years down the road he needed an insider in the Philistine camp to carry out his plan. Here's my point.
Pastor Jason is the lead pastor at One Nation Church, and I work really closely with him on a regular basis because I manage and create the contents here at my church. But the question is, what is God's plan? Mainly, the real question, the question that we all want to know is, how do we as human beings or believers work within God's plan? And when does our plan starts and end, and when does God's plan starts? So that's really the question. We want to know how these two things work together. Now, Pastor Jason used Samsung, and he talked about Samsung when he was doing something that was deemed as wrong, even by his own parents. But the Bible said that God was already using him to those actions that were seems as bad. Now, this gives rise to another question, and that question is it really Samsung's that's making all these decisions? Is it really our plans, or does our success and failure? Somebody just turned off the light in the hallway. So kind of threw me off. Like I was saying, is it really our plan? Is it really God's plan? Where does all these things really start? Because in Samson's story, it seems as if he's making decisions, but his decisions were not really his own decisions. It seems like his decisions were being controlled by God. Now, the only way to find out if this is true, first thing to do is to check in the Bible itself to make sure we're not just listening to what Pastor Jason is saying. You have to check the words yourself. So let's check the words and see what the word says about Samsung. Okay. All right. So I read the entire story of Samsung all over again, and what Pastor Jason said on the stage was right. The Bible does say that God was already working through Samson's decision, and some of those decisions, guys, are not necessarily the best decision. Just because the story follows Samson doesn't mean he's always right. So the question still remains, like, is God really the one guiding Samsung even through the bad decisions he was making, or was it Samson's own decision? Is it his own plan? And this brings me to a sermon by another pastor or preacher, and that is Keller. I watched this video a long time ago, I mean, a long time ago, and I know it has some answers we could really use. All right, let's get into it. Okay, before we move on, I want to acknowledge one thing before we move on in trying to answer this question. There's a lot of debate out there, and I know throughout this whole video I've been saying that Samson broke the law. So basically, there are people out there who are fighting over this idea that Samson didn't break the law. His actions were not necessarily against God's will because his first wife or his first marriage never went through, and his wife was given back to someone else. So I just want to acknowledge that just in case there's somebody watching this video who has that point of view. But either way, I believe the question still stands. What is God's plan, and how does that His plan and our plan work together? And this answer, I believe, I came across this before a long time ago in a sermon by Tim Keller, and all it took was just a search on YouTube, and the sermon is called Man's Plan and God's Plan. So it's very simple. You can find it yourself and listen to the whole 45 or 42-minute sermon to get the answers. But just for the sake of this video, I'm just gonna stick to a certain point and to make this point real quickly. Now, in this sermon, we have Dr. Tim Keller pointing out three ways that God guides His people. We have God guides people, the guidance that God does, basically, the guidance that God gives, and the guidance that God purchases for His people. Now, for the sake of this video, we're just gonna stake into the guidance that God does, and within this guidance that God does, we have a point made that God guides people paradoxically. And why is this a paradox? Now, we could find why it's called a paradox because in Proverbs 16 verse 9 it says a man's heart plans his course, but the Lord establishes his steps. So a man's heart plans his course, meaning you and I, we plan our course, but God establishes our steps. And this is the paradox. It's a paradox because you and I were making plans and God is ordering our steps. To us, it's either 50-50 or it's not working. And this text is basically bringing these two things together and saying, no, you plan. You are making your decision. So basically, Samson was making his own decisions. Samson was making good and bad decisions. And in those good and bad decisions, God was already working all things according to the plans that He had already had in mind for the Israelites. So if you listen to the sermon by Dr. Keller, he gives the example through Joseph and how his brothers sold him into slavery. And throughout the story, his brother has they meant it for evil, but God meant it for good.
And that's the reason why Joseph is able to say in his famous summary, but it's it's almost an exact restatement, though it happened earlier, of Proverbs 16, verse 3, when he looks at his brothers and said, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Now, what does that mean? It means this: never, ever, 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 ever think that God's not working, no matter how much it seems like He's absent. And at the same time, never, 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 never think you're going to be able to figure out for a long time what He's up to. Because it's only at the end. Don't say, He's got till Saturday to tell me, or,
So you and I, we could plan to do good or bad, or we could plan to do good and we'll fall in our doing because we don't know what we're doing at times. But we have to rest assured that God is working all things for the good of those who put their faith in Him. So there's a faith component that, and a reassurance that you and I, we have in Christ to trust that God is working all things for the good of us, or those of us that are putting our faith in Him. So it's a paradox because we plan but God orders the steps. God is already working within our doings to weave all things together. And I will put the links of this to the sermon below, so you guys can go watch the full sermon. I'll try to put the links to everything that I, came across, so you guys can also watch the sermon. All right, so to summarize everything, what the text or what the Bible is basically saying is that our plans are our plans and God's plans are God's plans. And there's a reassurance in this way of seeing God's plan, of seeing how our steps are ordered. Basically, the reassurance is that no matter what you do, as long as you put your faith in God, no matter how you plan, you have to plan though. That's the thing, you have to plan. But be reassured that despite the failures and mishaps of your plans and how imperfect they are, just be sure that God is working all things for the good of those who put their faith in Him. So, as a believer, you and I, we have a reassurance in knowing that we don't have to be perfect in our planning, but yet we still have to be strategic. We still have to plan. But God's plan supersedes, and God is already working all things for the good of those who put their faith in Him. So even those who want evil for you and I, God is even working their evil doing for our good, because He's a good God. All right, so guys, I'm gonna leave you guys with these today. Hopefully these helped you get to an answer when it comes to this video, to this question. When it comes to this question, hopefully it got you somewhere, and that's the whole goal. I want you guys to actually be encouraged to go seek more answers and not just take what I'm giving you based on the teachings and the teachers that I have around me. But I felt the need to just bring these questions or tackle these questions as part of my videos for 2023. Okay, so if you find this video helpful, if you find this video as something that you want to see more of, just leave a comment below, subscribe to the page, and let me know what you think, and we could just talk about it. All right, thank you guys. I'll see you in the next video.